It's your Friday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope everybody's having a great day out there today. Tremendous show coming up. Randy Johnson from the Star Tribune will join me here in just a little bit. A little college hockey talk. Gophers having a good season. Gophers men's hockey team having a good season. Number 3, I think, right now in the PairWise and the other rankings, the polls, things like that. Coming off a tough loss last weekend to a very good Michigan State team. They lost 9-3. They probably want to wipe that one away. Did so to a degree in the second game of that series last week, going to overtime. Wisconsin this week, rivalry series. Wisconsin's a pretty good team this year as well. So opportunity for them to start kind of making a surge towards the postseason. Randy and I will get into the Gophers. We'll get into college hockey, big picture around the state of Minnesota. And we'll talk a little Gopher football as well. New defensive coordinator for the Gophers. Randy and I will get into that. We'll also talk about the impact of the transfer portal this year on PJ Fleck's team kind of going forward into 2025. So stick around for that here in a little bit. A Vikings thought at the end of the show, a Gophers women's basketball and Gophers women's hockey thought at the end of the show. First, though, what did I miss? Thursday night belonged to the Wild and the Wolves, both teams playing the second legs of back-to-backs, both of them completing the back-to-back sweeps, both of them in very impressive fashion. But let's get to the Wild first, because this was a night in Montreal that was all about Marc-Andre Fleury. Their Hall of Fame goalie has said he's going to retire at the end of this season. He's kind of on a reunion tour, a kind of a departure tour, not a reunion tour, a departure tour, kind of a retirement tour. Everywhere that's meant something to him, everywhere where he's meant something to the community, they're giving him great honors. Kind of did this last year, then he came back for another year, but it really seems like maybe this is it for the Flowers. So they're in Montreal. Fleury grew up maybe an hour outside of Montreal, so it's a big deal for him to be back there. The fans are tremendous. They give him pregame honors. They're boosting him up during the game and then doing all sorts of stuff after the game as well. The Canadiens players giving him kind of a post-game handshake, which is not typical in a regular season hockey game. Here is Fleury just talking briefly about what the end-of-game moment meant to him.
I don't think I've done that before much, so no surprise, but it's very very kind, very humbling, for them for me that they stayed out and and Marty, right, and would be the that I played against, right, for many years, so yeah.
During the game was, of course, important to the Wild. They're playing without Kirill Kaprizov again. He's sidelined. He's going to have surgery. Going to be reevaluated in like 4 weeks. So they got to figure out how are they going to win without their best player, without their best scorer. Well, they grinded out a win 3-1 in Toronto on Wednesday, but then you got to do it again the next night. Tired legs, everything like that. But then they get the emotional lift of playing for Marc-Andre Fleury. Guys are blocking shots left and right, flying around the ice, bringing their best game, trying to make sure he has a great send-off in Montreal. And this is a good team. This is a team when they play with energy, when they play with discipline, when they play fast, they generally have a good result. And of course, that came in the 4-0 win on Thursday. Fleury gets a shutout. Only 19 saves. Wasn't the busiest of goalies. I think he only had to make 8 saves for the first 2 periods of this game. But had to make some stops, had to make some big stops, and the Wild played great in front of him, got 4 goals, made it, a fairly routine shutout, if a routine shutout can come, again, in front of what's ostensibly your hometown crowd in a game with a lot of meaning, both in the standings and, of course, if this is his last time in Montreal playing. He rises to the occasion, though. He wouldn't have 3 Stanley Cup championships if he didn't do that. That's what Wild coach John Hynes notices the most about Marc-Andre Fleury. Here he was after the game.
Yeah, for sure. I thought obviously the Montreal crowd was so great to Flower, and had a feeling the environment would be similar to the one in Pittsburgh, which it was, and it was nice to see the team battle so hard in front of Flower. He came up with some big saves, and as usual, I think the bigger the stage, the more emotional the stage, it seems like the better he gets. And then obviously at the end of the game, I know it meant a lot to him, and he said in the locker room after the game that appreciated how the guys played, and I know he really appreciates all the fan support.
So another great win for the Wild. They moved into second place in the division, although they've got a couple games in hand over the second place team in the division, Dallas, but still pretty far behind Winnipeg, but giving themselves some breathing room, banking some points on the road where, again, they've been tremendous this season. Third win in a row for the Wild, second since they found out that Kirill Kaprizov would be out for an indefinite but long amount of time. So big win for them, big moment for Fleury. Couldn't have really gone much better, couldn't have scripted it any better on Thursday in Montreal. The Wolves also probably couldn't have scripted things much better, maybe minus Julius Randle having to leave the game with a groin strain against Utah. Got off to a tough start. The Wolves were down like 25-10 early, but they rallied and walloped the Jazz 138-113. Ends up being a laugher by the end. Anthony Edwards was fantastic. Might have been the best Ant game of the season. Utah, watched some of that game. They are a defense optional team. There's a lot of room to operate, but that does not take away from what the Wolves were able to do. Second night of a back-to-back, again, after a pretty draining, emotional, highly charged win over Phoenix on Wednesday. You go to Utah, they're the worst team in the West. They've only got 10 wins. They had lost 7 in a row at that point, but every team's got talented players. Like the Utah's got a lot of good offensive players. They can put it on you if you are not ready to play, and they kind of did that early. Lauri Markkanen kind of caught a heater early. Everybody was making threes for Utah early, but then Ant and specifically the bench players for the Wolves gave them tremendous production and also tremendous energy. Jalen Clark, second game in a row where he's factored into the result in a positive way. Hadn't played much up to this point in his entire career, just a little bit of mop-up duty at the end of games. They call on him Wednesday to play defense in that game against Phoenix. They call on him again against Utah for a little bit more of an extended run. No Mike Conley Jr. He was a game-time decision, missed the game with a thumb injury. Still no Dante DiVincenzo, of course. He's going to be out for a little while with that toe injury. And then you lose Julius Randle in the middle of the game. But those first two are kind of the big ones for Jalen Clark, because if there's no Conley, there's no DiVincenzo. That's two guards out of the rotation. Clark is a guard, drafted a couple years back, had a torn Achilles in college, but they really liked him coming out of UCLA. I think he was the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. So kind of resting, rehabilitating, and then getting back into playing shape. Looks like he is good to go. He is a very good defensive player. He knows his role. Those players are valuable no matter what. Those players are valuable in the NBA. They are valuable on the Wolves. I think there was a pretty telling quote from Chris Finch that I'll get to in a minute. But, what they like about Jalen Clark, seems like he's not running in there eager to get up a bunch of shots. I think I like that about him. He played 17 minutes. He only took 3 shots, but he made 2 of them. He made a 3, had 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, a plus 34 in 17 minutes. Every minute he was on the court, the Wolves were gaining a 2-point basket. That is unbelievable. And again, it's against Utah. Temper it, I get it, but man, that is some unlikely production. That is production they have not been getting. It's just like out of nowhere, someone else coming into the rotation, playing huge, good, heavy minutes, and giving them the lift like that. Rob Dillingham was tremendous. Luka Garza was tremendous. I'll get to their numbers in a minute. Chris Finch talking about Jalen Clark. He's got a maturity that we could use. Just felt like he deserved a chance. Been thinking that way for a little while, and Wednesday against Phoenix was certainly an opportunity to do it. Maturity, it makes me kind of think he's kind of taken the Josh Minott minutes, and I think Josh Minott, his I think the beef they had with him was some lapses on defense, some lapses in focus. I don't know if that was a direct shot at Josh Minot. Probably not, but probably inadvertently at least telling you what they value right now. Maturity on the court, even though Jalen Clark is not an old player, right? He's very new to the NBA, early in his NBA career. Still just 23 years old, just turned 23 in October. So he's young. He was a 2023 second round pick. Kind of stash him, play him now in his second season. But if he can give them those kind of minutes, that is going to be a big deal for them. That changes their rotation a little bit, gives them some depth, gives them an opportunity to weather the storm without Rob Dillingham again for these extended minutes. But I said, not Rob Dillingham, without Dante DiVincenzo for these extended minutes. Dillingham was great. 23 points, 23 minutes, a plus 23, 19 points, 8 assists, had a steal, 4 turnovers. Want to clean that up a little bit, but man, plus 23 in his 23 minutes. He brought energy. He got them scoring when they needed it. He really seems to have, when he's out there with Ant and they are carving up defenses, when to give him another kind of ball handling, get to the basket option, which really, Mike Conley Jr., excellent steadying player, but at this stage of his career, he's not going to be, flying to the basket, doing all these, hard drives to the basket. Dillingham is. When you pair him with Ant, you give defenses something else to think about that the Wolves just haven't stressed a defense with in a while since Ant has been here. So it's exciting for the Wolves, I'm sure, and fans to think about how that can look going forward. And like I said, Garza had a big game, kind of taking up some of those Randall minutes. He's probably going to have to do that a little bit more if Randall's going to be out. Groin strain, those soft tissue things, those can linger. Interesting timing on that. Trade deadline about a week away. Wonder how that factors into the Wolves' thinking, if there was thinking at all about any kind of moves at the deadline, if that throws a wrench into plans or if it doesn't have any impact on it. That's a story for another day. Right now, Wolves have won 5 in a row, 27-21 now. Record starting to look a little bit better. Still not where they want it, but 27-21. Watching them play feels better right now. And again, just a big night for Minnesota sports. Those two teams getting the results. Second night of back-to-backs. 2 wins for both teams, both on the road. Impressive for the Wild and the Wolves. Let's talk college hockey, maybe a little bit of college football too, today with Randy Johnson from the Star Tribune. Randy, how are you?
Oh, doing well. Getting used to more in the hockey vibe right now, and diving in deep with Gophers, a little bit of Wild too, and but still, college football. There's enough going on in the off season to keep us working pretty good.
Gophers hockey team, men's hockey team, has had a little bit of an uneven stretch lately, and included in that was a pretty humbling is the right word, but it got out of hand. They lost 9-3 to Michigan State last weekend. Michigan State obviously very good, but what have we learned about them lately? Because this is kind of the time of year where you want to be making a move into as we get into towards February and March. Yeah,
it's they haven't quite shown the consistency that they need and that you would hope they would have entering this stretch. I think they got a chance this weekend against Wisconsin, a rivalry series. So yeah, they should be pretty excited for that and bring their A game if they can find it. And Michigan State, it was kind of an eye opener there. They just things started steamrolling on them in the second period. They had to change the goalie. That didn't help a whole lot. They were really really difficult night in the face-offs. They won only 20 of 64 face-offs, so they were chasing that puck the whole night. And Michigan State was very sharp that night. Gophers came back Saturday, played a much better game. Ended up settling for a tie than the shootout loss. So it's basically they the 4 games against Michigan State this season, they only potted 2 points in the standings. So Michigan State they were number 2 in the country. The Gophers are number 3. I definitely say Michigan State's one of the best teams in the country right now, the way they're playing. So it's kind of a gut check time for the Gophers. They have have some things they need to work through and improve on, especially as tournament time comes closer.
I want to get to a couple of those things in a minute, but first, this doesn't really matter for tournament time. But Randy, why can they not win a shootout? Why can they not? What is up with this? Because this is a long streak, right?
That is nuts. I mean, since the Big Ten began play in 2013-14, they are 2-17 in shootouts. But what's really just eye-opening is they have not connected on their last 25 shootout attempts.
Like how is that? They always have a lot of skill. Like, how is that possible?
I just think it's one of these oddities that I see them practicing it. You see them working on breakaways. I don't know. I wish I could put a finger on it. I think the coaching staff wishes they could do so too. I don't know if it's a point, how big of a point of emphasis it is. It's one that they just haven't mastered for whatever reason.
And again, it doesn't matter come postseason time because there's not a shootout in the postseason, things like that. But it would be nice probably for them to at least put one in the back of the net and not feel like they're giving away points every time they go into a shootout.
Well, what's kind of concerned with that, and not even to the shootout. When you get to overtime, they've been to overtime 6 games this year and they've won one of them. So it's It's 3-on-3. It's tough. It's more of a puck possession thing. If one of their last overtimes against Notre Dame, I believe it was, they just they never really got the puck and Notre Dame scored it. They had it for like 3 minutes. So you would think they would be doing better with the skill they have. That's another area. It won't be 3-on-3 overtime in the playoffs, obviously, sure. But. You want to be competitive enough where you want to win at anything.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, they play Wisconsin this weekend. The calendar will turn to February over the weekend here. As you kind of look at not just their record, not just their place in potential NCAA tournament seeding, which I want to get to in a minute. Like what are the positives and what are some of the things that might be cause for concern as they think about, not just how they finish this season, but go into the postseason?
Well, you look at them right now, and they're in a place where a lot of teams would love to be with it. They sit second in the Big Ten. They're number 3 still in the PairWise rankings. And that's the formula that the NCAA uses to seed their 16 teams in the tournament. But some concerning things pointed to the faceoffs. They were at 47.4%, which is tied for 50th in the country. Their penalty kill has not been good this year. It's tied for 56th in the country. Those are a couple big things. You lose against Michigan State a couple times. They lost the draw. 1 pass, 1 shot, and it's in the back of the net. So it's that you have to be concerned about. It's getting in one goal games too. They need to show a little bit more 1 goal games than they have. A lot of this consistency in doing the little things. They're a high end offensive team. They lead the nation at 4.0 goals per game, but you're not always going to get the 4 goals in the NCAA tournament. Just looked up that stat. Since the tournament expanded to 16 teams in 2003, only 3 times has a team won the title by scoring 4 or more goals in each of their 4 tournament games. So it's, you're usually going to run into a 2-1 game, a 3-2 game. It's usually a race to 3. They found out a couple years ago, you don't get that 3rd goal in the title game, you're not going to win it.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Still, though, like you say, they're in very good position pair-wise and, tournament-wise. You kind of broke down maybe some projected where teams are going to go for, what as things stand right now, what regionals they would be heading to. It looks like the Gophers would be pretty well entrenched as the top seed or 3rd overall in the Fargo regional at this point. But lots of other local teams to talk about as well. You wrote about St. Cloud the other day and how they're trying to they're looking on the outside in right now, trying to put together a run after a good start to the season. What is the big picture of college hockey, especially locally, looking like right now? Yeah,
it's the NCHC is interesting. There's a big series this weekend, North Dakota at St. Cloud State, and both of those teams are kind of on the outside looking in for the NCAA tournament. So either one of those we really can't afford to lose a couple this weekend. So it's that'll be interesting. You have the top of the NCHC. You have Western Michigan, and then you have Arizona State in their first year in the conference, right in second. Denver, the defending national champion, is tied for fourth right now. You would expect them to make a run sometime here. So that's been interesting. Minnesota State Mankato, they're in first place in the CCHA. The one interesting story there is Augustana, a new program. They're eligible for the NCAA tournament this year. They're only playing a 16-game CCHA schedule, and the standings are decided by points percentage. If they get in that tournament and win it, they could get an automatic bid. They're coached by Garrett Raboyne, former Gophers assistant under Bob Motzko.
Interesting. Still plenty of hockey to play, but I think the Gophers would definitely want to start fine-tuning things, finding the parts of their game that will lend themselves well to the postseason. Randy, let's shift gears just for a minute before we go. Gopher football. Couple bits of news. You wrote some, this is a little bit more like big picture stuff, but about transfer portal and, kind of some of the impacts of the portal this past offseason. And they made a, pretty significant promotion with their defensive coordinator.
Yeah, Danny Collins, safeties coach, and you look at the work he's done there with getting guys like basically Tyler Newbin, Jordan Howden, guys like that in the NFL. Now he's working with Coy Parrish and
that's a good one.
Kerry Brown. It's just a loaded group back there, and he's deservedly so. It'll be interesting. It's his first time as a defense coordinator calling the plays. They brought in another former Purdue defense coordinator, Kevin Kane. I think he'll probably be somebody that Danny can rely on, pick his brain, that type of thing. It's kind of interesting what's going on in college football. Corey Heatherman's here 1 year and then re-signs to stay for a couple. Then Miami comes around with a big offer and takes him away. You see that Penn State money whipped the Ohio State defense coordinator away for $3.1 million a year. So it's a different ballgame.
Coordinator money is becoming like old head coach money, like not too long ago. It's crazy. We'll see what the impact is. Are the Gophers gaining a reputation as being a school for safeties? I mean, you mentioned those few plus, Winfield too long before that.
They're definitely trying to promote that. A lot of social media type stuff about that, and they've developed guys that are doing well in the NFL. It's nice that you can hang your hat on something. You can, it helps in recruiting, definitely.
Coaching obviously isn't the only place where there's movement in the offseason now. A lot of transfer portal impact that you wrote about. Where do they kind of stand as we've kind of gone through a portal cycle here so far?
They're one of the teams in the Big Ten that's done pretty well judging in the portal. Basically, their rankings among the top 5 in the Big Ten and how they've done. So it's a bit up from what their high school recruiting has been. They've been a team that over the past couple of years they've spent wisely. I would put it. They don't have the money to go, spend a ton on any one person. They have to spend a good chunk to retain players, like a Darius Taylor, like a Coy Parrish. Obviously they hit a home run with Max Brosmer dipping down in the FCS level and getting a quarterback. They did great with that with defensive back Jack Henderson. They've really found bargains at the FCS level. Kyler Baugh before him, Jack Gibbons a couple years before that. So they'll continue to mine that part of it, and they do get some FBS guys too. They got a couple guys for running back to bring in more depth after they lose a couple players at the end of the season. So they're I think they've done a pretty good job of filling some holes. You don't fill them completely with the transfer portal, but there were some that you want somebody in there who's got some experience and can do something right away.
Unlike last year when they brought in Brosmer, it seems like the plan for now is that Drake Lindsay is going into camp as the number 1. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, they haven't really announced that per se, and they won't. It'll be a competition, but I think it's his job to lose right now. I would say that they like what they've seen out of him, and Drake is a very hard worker. He basically attached himself to Max Brosmer's hip, and was like a sponge trying to soak up any knowledge he could from Max. And it's probably a pretty good place to start. And Max was lobbying big time for Drake to get some run in the bowl game, and basically kind of jokingly told Greg Harbaugh, "Well, I'm not playing if we didn't go to put a package in for Drake."
That's pretty cool. They got a lot out of 1 year of Brosmer. I'm sure they would have loved to have more than just one, but that was to build a bridge to hopefully what they could have with Drake Lindsay, and to not take a step back, and in fact take a step forward last year, going from 5-7 in the regular season to 7-5, winning another bowl game. Like that was, it felt like, even though last year wasn't a home run, it did feel like it was significant in kind of a step they maybe took that could have been a step back without Brosmer.
Yeah, they kind of righted the ship there in a way. They and it was, they go 5-4 in the Big Ten. They were much more competitive in Big Ten play. They could have flipped a couple games the other way too, which they weren't that far necessarily from a 10-win season if things would have gone a little bit better in a couple games, but you can flip that around too. They won some one score games too. So it's it was a decent season. I think the goal, obviously you want to get to a more challenging bowl game per se. You've kind of lived in the that second tier of your pinstripes, your guaranteed rate, your Duke's Mayo. So you want to get to Florida. At least,
yeah, you do too. But
no, I wouldn't. It wouldn't bother me.
Well, we'll see. It does feel like there's more to be had from that program, but maybe some opportunities coming up in the coming years. Randy Johnson, appreciate it as always. We'll catch up again sometime else down the road on college hockey and college football again.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
Great stuff from Randy as usual. And of course, not to be overlooked, Gopher women's hockey team has a huge series this weekend at Ritter Arena against number 2 Ohio State. Gophers are number 3 in the country right now. That should be tremendous action. First game tonight, 6 p.m., and then a 2 p.m. matinee on Saturday at Ritter Arena. So big one for the Gophers there. After that, they're at Wisconsin, which is number 1. So doesn't get any easier for the Gophers, but they are always near the top and are in contention again for another national championship. Let's finish quickly with the cooler. A couple things. Speaking of not getting any easier, Gophers women's basketball team fell into a hole last night against USC. Couldn't dig themselves out. Lost 82-69. No real shame in that. USC is the number 4 team in the country. Tremendous team, tremendous, pedigree, tremendous star power over at USC. They actually did a pretty good job on Juju Watkins. She was below her season average. She had 20 points, but still, USC so deep, so talented. They come away with the win. Next up for the Gophers, number 1 ranked UCLA. So both the Gophers women's hockey team and Gophers women's basketball team playing some of the best competition in the world right now. And we'll see if they are up to or at least equal to the task in those games. And I wanted to point out a good story by Andrew Kramer, Star Tribune Vikings writer. And we talked about this a little bit on the Access Vikings podcast earlier in the week. Vikings were the oldest team in the NFL in 2024. That's kind of a snap-weighted adjustment age, kind of basically oldest based on who was playing for them, not just their entire roster, but who was playing for them. Average age of 28.3, and they had the oldest defense in the regular season and, of course, then the playoffs this year. That tells you something. They had a lot of experience this year, had a lot of players in the right places, had a lot of savvy in the game. maybe wore down a little bit, though, as the season went on. They need an injection of youth. They need some of these draft picks to hit. They need to start getting some young guys more into the fold. A big part of that, of course, is 2024 first-round picks J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner. Those guys playing some more, but they've got to get some more youth in the secondary, got to get some more youth on the defensive and offensive lines. They are getting old, and they have a lot of free agents to show for it. I don't imagine they'll turn the entire roster over in 1 year, even with all of the free agents they have departing potentially this year, but they're going to have to sign more to kind of make up for that. But in the next year, 2, 3, they've got to get younger. They've got to get more of that, A, cost-controlled players, but B, youthful legs that can carry them into the postseason and beyond. That will do it for me today. Hope you guys enjoyed everything this week. Should have plenty of good stuff coming up next week. Royce on Monday. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Enjoy your weekend. Back at it again on Monday.